Next week we'll be looking at advertising, and I think the week after that, then Rebecca would be talking to you about personal selling. All right? So, integrated marketing communications. It allows an organization to enter into coordinated dialogue with its various internal and external audiences. Okay? At the heart of everything is, who is your target audience? Who are your customers? All right? And the strategy should be built around that. Communicational tools used in this dialogue and the messages conveyed should be internally consistent with the organizational objectives and the existing strategies. All right? So any marketing communications plan is fed upwards. Overarching is the marketing strategy and the marketing plans that go along with it. All right? Which we'll come on to in a bit. Finally, the target audience should perceive the communications and associated cues as coordinated, likable, and timely. Okay? It has to be relevant. Some of the advantages of marketing communications, or an integrated marketing approach, is that it provides the opportunity to obviously customize your budgets and allocate those resources elsewhere. All right? So it can be more strategic as opposed to just kind of ad hoc. It has the potential to produce a synergistic type of messaging, okay? It also allows an organization to gain competitive advantage through a very clear positioning strategy. And it also provides a benchmark for the development of other types of communication activities, okay? Some of the disadvantages is it suggests that there's a uniformity in the style of messages, okay? Sometimes, yes, you are trying to get a consistent message across all the different tools that you adapt, but it isn't always as simplistic as that. Global brands are somewhat restricted to local communications, all right? And some of those messages can be misinterpreted. It could potentially damage a brand reputation if it's incorrectly managed. And then it requires basically an increased level of coordinated responses amongst external agencies. All right, so some of these are also advantages and disadvantages. But nonetheless, it is an important element that should be integrated, because you can't use one communication tool to raise the awareness of a product or service. It has to be a variety of different platforms. So, Angela has been introducing you quite extensively to a range of communication models. But because the unique nature of sport, okay, that is produced and consumed at the same time, that has a number of different elements to it on what makes it quite unique of it being intangible in nature, Pop would suggest that within a sporting context, we have to look at the communication process, all right, slightly different. So you can see here, under kind of the bubble around sport marketing communication context, you still see the sender, so that's obviously the sport organization. They create the message, all right? They choose the different types of media in which they are going to communicate that message to ultimately the receiver, all right? The slight difference, that's different than kind of other industries, shall we say, is the receiver. There could be a number of different types of audience members, okay? You could have direct audience members, so if you take example sports spectators, the receiver in the stadium that's actually viewing and attending an event is different than the communications that would be required for an indirect audience member, for someone that is actually maybe in a different country, watching that, that team online. All right, so for example, Chelsea, right? Chelsea has direct communications or direct marketing strategies towards their season ticket holders that links in from their CRM system, but they also have a different website. So if I live in America, which I have obviously previously, then my tailored communication is going to be entirely different, because you're not going to be promoting direct marketing message about attending the next match, okay, because it's not feasible, but you might be promoting or targeting me for generating for merchandise opportunities, okay? So the receiver is quite wide in diversity, okay? Depending on the receiver's response, now again, this is something I should say about this sport marketing communication context, this is really linked to the internal environment. The receiver, the one thing that this is different than other types of communication models is it has a communication loop. All right, we'll come on to it in a bit, but especially with the development of technologies like Twitter and Facebook, we have this kind of two-way symmetric type of communication dialogue. All right, the receiver, based on the messages that they receive, then communicate back to the sender. All right, some of that element is somewhat uncontrollable. All right, but again, that's not typically seen in a lot of communication models. The receiver's response, obviously, because the receiver, usually in the sport industry, has a much deeper connection with a sport organization, all right, because of their team identification and how connected they are for a team and how unlikely they are to switch brands, if you will, or teams, the more communication context that happens hopefully links to brand equity, all right, which is a very good measure of kind of sustainability and the likelihood that people will repeat purchase intentions, okay? The one thing that impacts this is the time sensitivity. So because of our relationship with sport and how things change over time, sometimes in a quite fluid manner, the time sensitivity around the message is really important. All right, now I would say this is even more important because of the development of technologies. If you post and you write angry feeds about decisions made of the team selection or the way that a club's being run and all of that, and the organization doesn't then respond in a time-sensitive manner, the likelihood is that's going to have a massive impact on brand equity. All right? The two over kind of arching themes that are external strategic elements linked to sport image and brand management and sport customer audience relationship management. So obviously things that communication that's planned, unplanned, controlled, or uncontrolled over time will fundamentally have an impact on these two kind of overarching strategic elements that will help with development of strategy in the future. Okay, so things are, when you begin to look at the sport industry and some elements with the leisure industry, it is different than just a fast moving consumer goods industry. So, all marketing decisions have to start with planning. Okay? Now, lots of organizations do undertake a number of different elements when it comes to their strategy and their development. When it comes to marketing communications, obviously the kind of starting point is a content analysis. All right? And content analysis kind of has four areas. One, the internal environment. Okay? And the internal environment obviously links to finances and marketing expertise. All right, external environment has to do with a number of external factors that are impacting their kind of industry at the moment. Other elements within that is the customer context. So who are your audience members? How have you segmented them? What is the decision-making unit? All right? And then finally, the business context. So competitive analysis and ultimately their current marketing strategy. All right, so kind of four areas that impact on this content analysis. Again, with marketing communications, it sits underneath the overall, which you can kind of see here, corporate marketing strategies that have already been developed. Okay, and those are usually kind of longer term. Marketing communications are kind of a shorter time scale. So depending on the overall corporate marketing goals or objectives, then you are creating communication objectives. All right? And I'm sure many of you are aware with the understanding of the importance of creating kind of good marketing objectives. So what is the goal at the end of the day? And what are our promotional types of objectives? And I know Angela's covered this a little bit, and we'll touch on it a bit more today. So this obviously links with positioning. The next decision is around the type of communication strategy, and that fits within under three areas: a pull, a push, and a profile. And I'm going to come on to those and what they mean in a bit more detail. Once these kind of three areas you have made the decision of the different types based on a number of kind of, I would say, market research that feeds into this process, is you are coming up with then a coordinated communication mix. All right, so this is where we start to look at the different tools that are available, such as advertising, sales promotion, direct marketing, and public relations, okay? The kind of the traditional elements. Once you start to identify what the advantages and disadvantages of all of these different types of tools that are available, as well as the media, which we'll come on to, then you need to make a decision of what will work best based on achieving your objectives, okay? Obviously, things that impact that is the scheduling. So if this product is going to be launched tomorrow, how long are we going to kind of have our ads run for, and over what period of time? How long is this campaign going to run for? All right? When are we going to start doing the advertising? When are we going to start doing the public relations? Are we going to fit 2 of these things together, or is it going to be sustained over time? Or are we going to have 3 sets of adverts? All right? So the scheduling is really important. Okay? The resources are obviously very important as well. So do you have the marketing expertise? And also finances. All right? At the end of the day, you know, everyone will have to work within some sort of marketing budget. Okay? And very likely is, especially when you have a new product. So all of these impact. Once those things are obviously done and you implement it and you control as much as you can, you begin to evaluate it. The little arrows are kind of an interlinking between some of the processes that then naturally need to feed back into each other. Okay, so there is some interlink within these, and again, especially if you are, you know, the decisions to use agency, and then fundamentally it should then feed all the way back in to do content analysis to repeat that cycle again. All right? But it is very important to carry out a planning process when it comes to identifying a kind of integrated marketing communications plan. So, possible objectives. Like I said, I know Angela's covered quite a few of these. So, a little mock assessment question for you all. If you, thinking about your product assessment, all right, and your task of launching a new product to the marketplace, what would you say would be your primary objective? And these are the types of questions we would ask, and you can kind of go A, B, C, D, E, G. Normally it's out of 5. So, show of hands, how many people think A? Or create awareness? Okay. Okay. Again, I'm talking primary possible objective. B, stimulate demand. Oh, come on, people, just commit to something. All right? C, encourage product trial. D, identify prospects. C, retain loyal customers. Facilitate reseller support. Okay, so combat competitive promotional efforts. And finally, reduce sales fluctuations. All right, so I'd say about 90% of you would fail on that question because you didn't commit to anything. All right? Make a choice. Don't be afraid. I just asked you to raise your hand. I'm not asking you to speak to me. All right, so who raised the hand on the first one? Gentleman at the back. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Seems to be a little bit more now, 11, 12. Yes, you were all correct. You got 100% on that. All right, so, because guess what? No one knows your product exists. It's brand new. You have to create awareness, all right? So, there are a number of different possible objectives, and yes, there will be some overlap as well. But again, you know, thinking about your product launch, it's really important for you to understand what your overarching objective is, okay? So, moving on from the planning process, all right, we need to identify, so as your assessment, when you stand up here and present, and I hope you guys, you know, one of the key components is group interaction, So if I ask you a question, and hopefully your audience won't, have a poor response like you just gave me. And ultimately, you have to identify who your audience is, all right? And segmentation allows you to identify the most measurable, accessible, and sustainable segment of your target audience, all right? So it's obviously an analytical process. It's about taking a population and subdividing it into measurable types of segments so that you can enhance the development of your marketing strategy, all right? Again, it's really important to understand segmentation and then the other components that kind of follow after that, because you will not have the budget to have mass marketing, all right, to every person in every part of the world, okay, because you're not an established brand, all right? You're a brand new organization, you're a brand new entity, all right? So you have to segment your audience, and again, you have to tell us who your audience is that you are targeting, okay? So the segmentation process begins with obviously segmentating, so considering available variables for segmentating, and I'll come on to what some of those variables are. You use the chosen variable or combination to group customers into segments. So again, it's taking that population and subdividing it. So I could divide you guys as a population of students. I could say, right, I could segment you by females and males. I could segment you by gender plus age. I could segment you gender plus age plus sporting interest, all right? And it can go on and on and on, all right, till I identify a kind of a core target market. When you begin to examine the profiles, this hopefully results in a substantial amount of a market, all right? So this is one of the things that we ask you to do. What's the problem of your target audience? Is that going to be big enough, all right? At the end of the day, your product needs to sell lots of them in order to be a profitable business, okay? So that's why you have to identify the market and how big it is. You need to check the validity of each segment that begins to emerge and identify if they are, in fact, accessible and measurable and a substantial size enough that will impact kind of a return on your investment. The next thing is selecting a targeting strategy. All right, so how do you intend to then do this? And again, we'll come on to the kind of 3 strategies which we'll look at. You decide which and how many segments you should be targeting, all right? Is it in the UK? Someone asked me the other day, does this product have to be launched within the UK? No. All right, that's for you to kind of tell us. And then positioning. So you understand, all right, and usually most marketing is a consumer orientation approach. You have to understand the consumer's needs, wants, and desires so that you can then deliver products that hopefully will address those, okay? So you need to position in the mind of the consumers what your offering is, all right? You then design appropriate marketing programs and communicate the desired positioning to the targeted customer, all right? So this is, again, the application of these principles is what you will be assessed on within your presentation, okay? Base variables for segmentation. So these are a number of different base variables that can be used when you begin to segment an audience. More and more, especially within consumer segments, we're looking at things like demographic or geodemographic segmentation as well as behavioral and benefit segmentation, all right, especially within the sport industry, because a big portion of the sport and leisure industry is service related, okay? So examples of, and I know some of you are aware of this, but not all, is Sport England has come up with a market segmentation tool which they begin to identify to help increase sport participation. All right, I'm just going to pick on Jackie. All right, and you can go, I'm not going to spend a lot of time through this, but really you can see mainly age 36 to 45, that's a demographic variable. You can see some of the other ethnic origin of where, so that again that's a demographic variable. It gives you a sports overview, which I would say are some psychographic variables, which again are current activities and interests and hobbies. It also, even further down, you can say that Jackie's likely to live in these towns. So again, geographic variables there. Then we look at how sporty Jackie is, so what her current behavior is. What drives Jackie for participation? So that's a benefit variable. So what are the benefits and motivations that drive her for participation? So you can see here how a number of different variables are used to identify and segment a target audience. Okay? And again, you will see things like when you start to research in Mintel and other reports like that, you will see a number of different types of variables that identify consumer markets. All right? And all of that evidence will need to be put into these pro formas for next week. All right? So, marketing communication strategy and the options. All right, a pull position strategy links to promoting a product directly to the consumer to develop stronger consumer demand that pulls the product through the marketing channel. All right? So again, these are all linked to kind of the communications strategy. So this is directly to the actual consumer itself. The next one, and I should say that with the pull strategy, if you have a business to customer, B2C, all right, that is links to a pull position. You might also have a business to business customer, all right, and that would also be a pull position strategy. Push positions promote a product only to the next institution down in the marketing channel. And what they're trying to do is feed as much communications within the distribution channel via its intermediaries to then hopefully raise the awareness and have customers. All right? The first one links to actually directly towards the consumer that hopefully there's that kind of creates and stimulates demand that retailers will have to stock their shelves because there's such a demand. Okay? And the final one is the profile position strategy. This influences a wide range of stakeholders, not just customers or intermediaries. Okay? And usually, this is the communication used for a profile strategy does not mention a product, okay, a specific product or service. All right? It's usually about kind of external brand positioning strategies, so things like sponsorship. All right? Here you can see, with the pull strategy, this is the flow of communication. All right? So the target audience is, again, the consumer. The message focus is around the product or service. And the communication goal ultimately is around purchasing. Okay? So again, this kind of pull is all around kind of stimulating demand. All right? And like I said, you can see here that it can be, again, directly towards the consumer, but also the end user. So really what the end user is, and again, it can be business to business. The push, these are the different types of channel intermediaries, the retailers, wholesalers, manufacturers, things like that. And the message focus is predominantly, again, on the product and service. And this, again, is about developing relationships in the distribution network, okay, to offer a range of different communications. Now, with the pull strategy, typically, there's usually traditional advertising that goes along with this, all right? Because again, it's around stimulating demand, okay? Kind of below the line communications is sales promotion, all right? With the push, okay, predominantly used is personal selling tactics, okay? Then additional kind of secondary elements is trade advertising, trade sales promotions, and we're seeing a bit more within kind of direct marketing, all right? Profile is all relevant stakeholders. What the message focuses on is around the organization itself, or I would say sometimes, you know, the kind of the overarching brand. A good example of this is through the sponsorship of the Olympics with Procter & Gamble. Procter & Gamble obviously house a number of different brands and products under their umbrella, but they were kind of focusing around building the reputation of the overarching organization. Okay? Things you predominantly see, or the types of tools used here, is again sponsorship and public relations. So again, you can kind of begin to see here that depending on who your audience member is, the results and the different types of communication strategy that you use and the different tools will impact the types that you begin to consider. Now, I would also kind of add a word of warning that it's not always just one or the other, all right? Especially with services, there is a range. But I would say for your assessment, you do not want to be identifying loads of different target audiences, all right? Because you'd have to produce loads of different types of strategies that link that. That's why the biggest important element of this all is you being really clear of who your target audience is. So, which again is why that kind of sits at the heart of all kind of tools or marketing communications that sit around it. So again, these are kind of what I would say are traditional tools or promotional tactics. All right, so again, we have sales promotion, direct marketing, public relations, personal selling, and advertising. The thing that sits kind of in the middle and interrelates all of these different types of things is the media. All right, so the media isn't a tool itself, okay? It is, in fact, the way in which you deliver. All right, so for example, and I have some examples later on, sales promotion, it could be 10% off on, your next purchase, or buy one, get one free. But you also then have sales promotion, which we'll look at in a little bit, around the different types of apps, the different types of websites that you have to offer. Okay, so those are just the way in which the messages and the tools are delivered. All right? Some people make the mistake and they think, well, social media is a tool. No, that's the medium in which the things in the outer circle are in fact delivered. Okay? I would say that because of this, there's lots of development, and over the module we will explore some of the role and the use of, Google Analytics and AdWords and pay per click and Facebook and Twitter and all of that. Just because you have a Twitter account or a Facebook account, how do you intend to actually drive the awareness to those accounts? All right? So thinking about these in a bit more depth. But again, really important that you have to understand the advantages and disadvantages of each one of these concepts, how in fact they are going to be delivered, and why you have selected the ones that you have for your product launch. So, the interesting thing when it comes to sport is some of the traditional elements don't always fit so nicely, all right, within those remits. So we obviously have advertising, which we'll discuss in more depth next week. Publicity we're going to come on to, but it's not just about public relations. Publicity is more around the kind of tools that public relations sits under. Incentives, this is again something that's slightly different than the sales promotion. Incentives is because if sport, you're not always making an actual purchase, all right? You might be participating, or you might be attending an event and you can't take something tangible away from you. You might not be purchasing. So the connotation of sales promotion implies that you are making a purchase. All right? Incentives that are used in sport are like little things at baseball games, the bobbleheads that are given to you, or you come and you get a free t-shirt or a free pen or whatever the case may be. Those are all incentives to help you stay connected. All right? Probably, some with better than the other. Personal contact. So again, if we think about personal selling, you're not always buying something. There's not always a monetary exchange. Personal contact kind of links back to, the sport management and the image management focus in the sport integrated marketing communications model that we looked at previously. The personal contact is about you building relationships over time with athletes, with people within the organization. Okay, that personal contact. So even in one sporting environment, you will have a number of different personal contacts that will create an overall image of that experience. Atmospherics. So again, this really relates to the actual stadium experience. All right, so everything from you walking up to the stadium, the more you can control this environment, all right, because a lot of things can't be controlled, the outcomes of the matches, the people within the stands, but again, food, atmosphere, cheerleaders, all of this sort of stuff helps create an atmosphere that people hopefully want to come back to. All right, some of these things are much more controlled and should be controlled and facilitated, which isn't always seen within kind of traditional communication tools. Licensing, we're going to discuss this kind of towards the end of the module, but again, this is kind of a brand strategy. And then finally, sponsorship. All right, so the exchanges that happen when sponsors associate with sport organizations to create and enhance the experience, or sometimes hinder it. All right, so all of these things are slightly different within a kind of a sporting context. So we'll move on to the first one which we're going to look at is public relations. Okay? So this is what the Institute of Public Relations defines it at. Again, a deliberate, planned, and sustained effort. I think most of these tools kind of should have this as a definition at the start of it, because they should be deliberate and planned. All right? To maintain a mutual understanding between an organization and its publics. And we'll kind of come on to it, but there's lots of publics in which, you know, an organization needs to communicate with. All right, so this is an example around it. So the focus of sport public relations is in the middle bit. You can see all the different types of stakeholders and their publics which sit around this. Some are internal and some are external. Okay, so consumer, employees, investors, donors, those different types of things are kind of internal, external, government, media, community, and the industry. So depending on your messages and what you are, again, your primary goal, understanding which publics you want to actually have a communication exchange with is really essential. So, public relations is a broad set of communication efforts used to create and maintain a favorable impression or relationships between the organization and its stakeholders. And again, the reason why, and we'll kind of come on to the strengths and weaknesses of each of these, but the reason why this is also important is because it has a bit more credibility than the other types of tools. All right? Because it's kind of seen as kind of third-party endorsement. All right? Publicity this is basically more of a tool than it is actually, you know, a tactic per se, but it's non-personal communication in things like news stories about an organization or its products. And again, this can be transmitted through mass media, all right, or a number of kind of new media technologies. And you're seeing this is kind of free publicity, all right? Most of our public relations that we see within sport organizations are usually on the organization's own website. All right? So again, I would say that part of that limits the credibility, because anybody, and I'm sure many of you on your placements, wrote, you know, news content for those organizations. But if it is in mainstream press, regardless of the media that is in fact used, this is a way of free publicity, but it also, again, enhances the credibility because it's almost being endorsed by a third party. So, Grunig and Hunt have come up with a number of different models, and they begin to compare basically four key theories that have come out of the literature. Okay? And so if you kind of start at the top of the characteristic and go straight down the column, it will tell you kind of the purpose of it, the communication model, the nature of the history behind it, and where it's practiced today. Now, one thing I would say is that the limitation to this is Grunig and Hunt came up with this in 1984. So they pegged the sports industry around press and agency publicity, and the estimated at that time was 15%. I think that within the literature more recently, there's been a shift. And what we were talking about before, many organizations and sport organizations are adopting this two-way symmetric communication. All right? This two-way dialogue between the receiver and the sender. Okay? It should be balanced. Okay? It's a mutual understanding, and it allows us to connect and communicate backwards and forwards. All right? To build a relationship over time. Public information, so a lot of these things are just kind of a one-way, here's a document, here's an industry report on this, and they kind of send that communication to you, but there's nothing receiving in back from that. All right? Public relations has also become a lot more creative in the way in which public relations stunts have occurred. I'm sure you've all heard of flash mobs, and I've looked at that previously. Lots of different types of elements. It's no longer a press release that is sent to, you know, a traditional newspaper, and then it's altered by the editor, and then it's kind of comes back. Lots of communication happens instantaneously. All right. So we can see here how the development of the frameworks, but within the sport industry and much more industries, the two-way symmetric communication and public relations strategy should be considered more fully. So characteristics of the opportunities considered amongst the most cost-effective means of communicating messages to target audiences. You can package your message in its most persuasive format. All right, so you have the opportunity to actually provide the content. It has this neutral coverage, which again enhances the ability to kind of be endorsed. Because as marketers, we can control the messages when it comes to advertising. All right? We can control all the messages when it comes to direct marketing. All of that is controlled by us, and sometimes is seen with kind of a pessimistic view. All right, but with public relations, there is this element about it being more credible than the other marketing communication tools. This acts as a mean of reducing buyers' risk. Okay, so we might go through a decision-making process where we kind of are thinking about, yes, I want to buy this product, it's really interesting and all of that, but I'm a bit nervous because it's a lot of money and you start to doubt yourself. All right? Things being endorsed by, whether it's a forum or a neutral organization, allows us to diminish some of that risk when it comes to the purchase decision. The limitations, you can't control the placement of your messages, so lots of times when you try to input your brand identity within that, the editor will strip that away. So no placement is guaranteed, so you might take a lot of time and effort to create, you know, a good PR strategy, a good PR campaign, and all of this stuff. But, you know, a major event in the news can happen, and with all the goodwill in the world, your story gets bumped or your feature gets bumped. All right? Your message is subject to alteration by the editorial staff or influences. All right? So this is, again, problematic because whilst you're trying to control that message, it can be altered. Brand mentions, again, can be limited, and it can often be challenging to secure. So the relationships of engaging with, contacts of journalists and things like that will have an impact. So, sales promotion. These are a variety of short-term promotional tactics. And they are designed to stimulate immediate product demand. Okay? Anybody have any idea of what percentage should be used in a sales promotion to entice us to act? So if I said this chocolate bar is 5% off today, would that stimulate demand? Anybody know what percentage should be where people kind of notice and it has somewhat of an impact?
20.
20? Good, but not that high necessarily. So
50.
15?
50.
50. Whew. You're not going to make any money, Jake. 15 it is. Yeah? So like I saw a little sign, 10% off postgraduate fees. Not really, it's not really that much of an impact on our wallet and stuff like that. So, but a lot of these, and I'm sure you go to the supermarket, there's tons of offers and sales promotions that go along with this. So, when we are starting to think about new products and incorporating sales promotion, there are things like sampling. All right, so sampling, these are our attitudes are confirmed based on the results of sampling a product. Now, one thing I would say, when it comes to sampling, sport is very difficult to sample, okay? Because, again, you could go to a sporting event, you can't really take that home with you and try it out. You can't kind of really necessarily all the time go and try in a new pair of trainers. But sampling within the leisure industry and how people kind of utilize sampling, so it's not necessarily, you get, a little sample of, cream, and you can use that and try it, or perfume. The lady comes around and sprays you in, Debenhams or something like that. So the sampling can't always happen within a sport. But within the leisure industry, when you think of, becoming a member of a health and fitness facility, they allow you to have an open day, try out a class, so that's an element of sampling within them. All right? It's a risk-free opportunity for consumers to test the product. Coupons. All right? Gone are the days where you cut out coupons and bring those into the store. I mean, I know lots of the main supermarkets at the moment have, when you buy something, because it's very competitive, you get little bits of paper to use on your next purchase and stuff like that. So there is some element of coupons, but there's also things in development, and again, this is where the media comes in, okay? Anybody have ever heard of voucher or Groupon? Anybody have their service mobile phone through O2? O2 priority moments, anyone know what that is? All right, so I'll give you an example. So, and this is where the development, I think, has been, pretty creative.
Let's say you're out and about, hitting the streets, making things happen, and you want to grab a bite to eat, but can't decide where to go. Or you're out for some fun, but have no idea where to find it. All you know is you want something awesome right now. That's why there's Groupon Now. It's a new thing from Groupon that knows where you are and shows you all the great deals happening nearby. Just launch Groupon and instantly see great deals going on around you right now. Let's see. I could get 30% off a yoga class, or maybe half off a Segway tour, or how about $15 off the price of a glamorous makeover? Or maybe you're hungry and want to try out something new. Ooh, I hear Big Frank makes a burger that'll blow your face off. Big Frank can schedule deals whenever he has empty tables. And that helps fill his store with new customers like us. Everyone wins. Pretty smart. Let's make this happen. My info is already saved in my Groupon account, so all I have to do is tap a button. And my Groupon is ready to go. Big Frank scans it in. And I get my burger. This burger is delicious. Find great local deals to use right now. It's Groupon Now.
Okay, so I don't think that this service is necessarily available at the moment in the UK, but there are similar things such as things like O2 priority moments. Jonathan, tell us about TikTok. Is that something similar?
It's a mobile app which offers like different deals around these. Like, for example, at a barbershop called Method in the city centre, it offers 20% off to all students, and it offers different places in Hilly as well, like the Arc and Box, cheap food prices and drinks.
Yeah, so it's similar to that. So you download an app, you get the opportunity to actually then go and that essentially is sales promotion. It's just not that the consumer doesn't necessarily have to go out and look for all of these options. And you can see there how the control of the actual organization it will benefit too, depending on the seasonality of there. All right, so it's an instant, effective point of purchase incentive. Other things like consumer deals, point of purchase. So sometimes you will see a coordinated approach of, a new chocolate bar being advertised on television, and then you go into the supermarket, and at the checkout, there is a point of sale display, okay? That's there for you to have an impulse kind of buy, all right? And things like that. So again, you can see how it's much more coordinated, and it's not necessarily about, certain elements. There's bonus packs, all right, you buy one, you get one free. Refunds and rebates, sending in proof of purchase, in return you receive cash refunds. All right, and again, some of this is no longer done just by snail mail, but by direct marketing and email. Price off, so again, simplest technique that offers direct reduction in the price. So again, 15% off is usually kind of the standard. For existing products, you're looking at things like premiums, attract repeat buyers, stimulate impulse purchase behavior, and brand switching behavior. Again, we're not going to be brand switches when it comes to supporting. If you're a Chelsea supporter, you're not going to then, support Tottenham or something like that. That's not necessarily happening. But when it comes to actual products, depending on the new product features and things like that, you may, in fact, are more likely with low involvement purchases to switch behavior. Self-liquidating will contribute to the cost of the actual incentive itself. And contests and sweepstakes, you're seeing a lot more of these. Again, coordinated types of on packaging. You'll see, if you text in this code or enter onto this website, you could be entered into a certain sweepstake or contest. And then finally, direct marketing. So again, this includes any marketing communication tool that interact directly with the customer. And again, it's all about kind of direct response to that advertising. All right, and we're seeing more through kind of a coordinated email approach. Lots of sport organizations use their customer relationship management systems to directly market to their sports fans. Okay, so again, this is an example from last year around a student offer, direct marketing, handing out leaflets. I'm sure many of you guys, when you go out on a Wednesday night, you outside clubs, there's lots of promoters. I'm sure there's probably some promoters here in the audience where they hand out, entry or discounts and things like that. But again, traditionally, it was handing things out face to face. All right. Now, direct marketing is using a different type of medium or combining traditional and kind of, I would say, more contemporary marketing strategies along with this. All right? So, establish, the other thing you need to think about in all of this is your budget, your marketing budget. All right? You don't have endless amounts of money, all right? Especially if you want to be successful. All right? There's different ways in which to kind of set or allocate a budget. And the first one is arbitrary. So again, promotional budgets are established after the organization's other costs are considered. This is the most unsystematic approach and not really the most highly recommended because again, if you're trying to be a profitable type of business organization based on your products or services, then this probably is not the best one to choose. Competitive parity, based on what competitors are doing in certain product categories. So most kind of, within the kind of the sportswear or the sports shoe category, Adidas has, I think, sometimes I've heard around a budget of around $50 million to promote their kind of sport, their marketing budget. That's their marketing budget. Nike has $150 million as their budget. Okay? So Adidas to compete, and actually, but Adidas is being very creative because they actually have the edge over Nike as far as branding is concerned, all right? And in the marketplace, they have a higher level of consumer or brand loyalty as opposed to Nike does. So you look at that competitive parity, and there's some people within the market share and the marketplace, if someone has the market share and they have more budget to play with, and probably can sustain a competitive advantage, it is unlikely that, another organization is going to be able to compete with that. So how can they use their budget more creatively to obviously either gain some of that market share or still have their foothold in there? So again, percentage of sales. So if you determine a standard percentage based on past or forecasted sales, all right, that normally, so if you wanted to allocate 5% of $1 million budget, you have $50,000 towards your marketing budget that you could use, all right? And then you have to be selective around those different types of promotional tools, okay? And then finally, objective and task method. So again, this is the most logical and systematic, but there are also problems with this. And the reality is the main issue with this type is sometimes the objectives are not clearly identified, the communication objectives. All right? So you can begin to tally them up, look at the advantages and disadvantages, you look at the costings that it's going to cost you for direct marketing and 8,000 leaflets to distribute, and what are some other ways in which you could do that at a more cost-effective approach. So, Schenck puts all of this together in this lovely little kind of format, all right, and talks about the kind of the advantages and disadvantages, a little bit of each, all right, and it kind of begins to understanding the message flow, all right, the speed of the communication, and the strengths and weaknesses of these kind of four main kind of key traditional communicational tools is really important, okay? Because you do need to be integrated, but you also need to understand what your primary objective is and how to reach that audience in the most effective manner, okay? Those are some references. I hope everyone is reading throughout the semester, all right? And I will see you all next